Greetings, this is Tamika Walters, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Burr Forman. With me today is internationally acclaimed photographic artist Sheila Pree Bright. Sheila is the daughter of a United States Army veteran who lived all over the world throughout her childhood. As an adult, she settled in the American South and now resides with family in Atlanta, Georgia. Sheila earned a Bachelor of Science from the University of Missouri and a Master of Fine Arts from Georgia State. She brings a unique and compelling voice to photography, often using her lens to focus on the issues and perspectives of marginalized communities. Time would fail us to list all of the places that have exhibited Sheila's work, but as a sampling, her work has been featured at Atlanta's High Museum of Art, the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., Boston University's Mugar Memorial Library, the Library of Congress, the Turner Contemporary in Kent, England, the Art Gallery of Hamilton in Ontario, Canada, and the Leica Gallery in New York. Sheila, we are grateful that you decided to spend some time with us at Burr Forman. We are preparing for the observance of the national holiday honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and there is much in the body of your work that reminds us of Dr. King's vision and ultimately inspires us to move that vision forward into contemporary times. Welcome, Sheila Pree Bright.
Thank you for having me, and it's an honor to speak before you.
Awesome. We're going to cover 3 different recent projects that you have put out into the world, and each of which I think will touch on an aspect of civil rights and Martin Luther King's legacy. And so I want to start with 1960 Now. Give me a moment, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
So let me know if you're seeing it.
Yes, I do.
Okay, wonderful. So your project, 1960 Now, was born out of the extensive photos that you took of the protests that were going on all over the United States in 2020. You combined documentary images of those protests with portraits of past and present social justice activists, deliberately drawing parallels between the 1960s civil rights movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. My question for you, Sheila, is this. As we honor Dr. King and reflect on the gains of the civil rights movement of his time, do you view your work as somehow furthering his legacy? In other words, are you one of the people that's kind of picking up the torch to continue a modern civil rights movement? Or do you see yourself as more of a historian who is recording the activities of those who are picking up the torch?
For me, it's more about me being a visual storyteller. I never thought of myself as a historian or even picking up the banner or actually, what am I trying to say? Or an activist. I never really considered myself like that because for 7 years, I have been photographing the Black Lives Matter movement. And Nina Simone, which is a songwriter, a pianist, and an artist, she talked about it's an artist's duty to reflect the times. And how can you be an artist and not reflect the times? So I feel that I fit in that category as a visual storyteller. And I just feel that it's important for stories to be told by African-American people, because far too long, our stories have been told by others. So I decided that when Trayvon Martin happened, I decided to go to the ground as an artist to see what was going on besides what was projected in the media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so in between all of that time, I was traveling on and off planes, photographing protests. I was doing talks about my work. I was having shows about my work. And I didn't realize how that actually took a toll on me. And it wasn't to the end of 2017, I decided that I was not going to photograph anymore. And the movement, because I felt that, what am I doing as an artist? I travel a lot. I go to the universities. I have all these speaking engagements. And I feel that when it comes to our society, is this work is kind of like a perpetual revolution. And so, but what happened is when COVID happened in 2000, say the end of 2019 and 20, and George Floyd happened. And this little voice came to me and said, Sheila, you have to continue. You can't just sit on the sidelines. You got to tell your stories from your point of view as a visual storyteller to share to the world. So I went out and I started photographing, and some of the images that you see right now are all the images that I took in Atlanta of the George Floyd movement. And it's like, you go back to that image where it says Millennium Civil Rights. I feel that when it came to the young people, they felt that they were fighting the same fights their parents and grandparents fight, and that is Martin Luther King. But they feel that they are the ones that have to carry and pick up this torch. And when I was down on the ground, a lot of the young people didn't have the support of the elders, because the elders felt that Martin Luther King would have did it that way. But we're in a new time. It's like with this Black Lives Matter movement, you can get information, can just travel in a matter of seconds globally. And that's what happened to George Floyd. So that's what the difference is between the civil rights of the 60s and the movement. It's just carrying that torch on and stuff. And they are really grateful that some of the elders would come in and talk to them about their experience in the movement in the 60s. And one thing that I can tell you is that when you see these images, what I like to portray, because I think about the media a lot and what the media portray, I don't want to show you, and this is a reality now, I don't want to show you a Black male that's on the top of a car with fire. Okay, I want to show you the different side of it. I want to show you the positive and the negative side of it, because I don't want to make the media negative. It's just that I would like to show the other side, because these individuals and people are just like everybody else, and they just want justice. Can you think about how long? I think about my parents that have come from the silent generation, where they had to deal with the Jim Crow laws. They were young people too, okay? And these young people may not have experienced that, because I think it's a little bit different the way that they think about racism. But yet still they are experiencing the same thing, but in a different form and fashion. And when it came to the civil rights, what kept them abreast was the music and prayer. What keeps the young people in the Black Lives Matter movement is the same thing, but they call it Black joy, which is revolutionary. They have protest songs. It's just like Kendrick Lamar when in 2016, when in Baltimore.
We're gonna be all right, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Is that the
it's all right. We're gonna be all right. okay? You had Janelle Monáe, Say Her Name. And those are protest songs that keep you going. And when you're out in the streets, they are singing and saying that, and you come so involved in that. It's very emotional down there. It's not, I saw a lot of fear. I saw a lot of crying and a lot of hurt, okay? And so I just think that when it comes to the day and time of where we at now in this country, and a matter of fact, globally, a lot of individuals are not going to stay on the sideline and watch this happen. We have to speak up, because if not, it will not change. And I think protest is one of the ways to get it out. It's not all the other ways, but it is another way of talking about what's going on with just ordinary people. And that's what I'm interested in, is ordinary people, because they're the ones that are the drivers of what's happening in popular culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And your remarks are touching on one of the themes. It's funny, I noticed this theme in your work, and then I went to your website and you actually called it out on your website that you like to focus on the voices of the unheard. And so in your portrayals of, the way you've captured the protests, like you said, you're trying to show an aspect that the media may not see. Many people think of protests only as an expression of anger, right, but it is also an expression of grief and a deep sadness and fatigue. And I appreciate you mentioning that you yourself, as an artist, needed to take a break. I think many people, particularly in the African American community, reached that point, because again, we were dealing with it from Trayvon and then all the way through George Floyd. And there were many of us who just kind of needed to take a moment and stop the conversations. And so I appreciate you mentioning that, because that's a piece of it that I think, the broader society is not always aware of. It's viewed solely as anger, but there is a deep sadness and just tiredness that is involved in dealing with these ongoing tragedies. And I think we can see that in this next project that I want to talk about of yours. It's called Mothers March On. So during the 2019 Super Bowl, which took place in Atlanta, this photo that I'm showing here was installed as a mural on a building located on Pryor Street, and was ultimately part of a larger art project called Off the Wall that was prepared specifically for the Super Bowl. The black and white photo pays profound and, in my opinion, elegant homage to Black mothers who lost their sons to police brutality or other acts of racial violence. These include, for example, the mother of 12-year-old Tamir Rice, Oscar Grant's mother, and Eric Garner's mother. Mothers whose sons became the subject of hashtags, protests, and national debates. The New York Times did a wonderful piece on this mural that I encourage everyone to read. Now, the mother in the middle of this photo is Gwen Carr. She's the mother of Eric Garner, who inspired the, I Can't Breathe.
Hashtag
I Can't Breathe hashtag, exactly. She's wearing white and she has her arms pointed downward and wide open, palms facing out. Can you talk about how this pose came about and what, if anything, is being conveyed by this image?
This was hard for me, because for 7 years I've been photographing the Black Lives Matter movement. And when I had the opportunity to, this was a commission piece for me to do, I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. It was about the legacy of the civil rights movement then and now. And I started thinking about mothers, because if you think about mothers, even though their sons or daughters were victims of police brutality, everybody looked at them I'm not saying everybody, society looks at these mothers, this is based on from what I had a conversation with them, as very negative and not taking care of their children, raising them right. You know, they might be single mothers. And so I wanted to give homage and honor to these mothers, because they had no idea. I call this piece Mothers March On. They had no idea that they would become activists. And every time when they see an act of violence against police brutality against the Black body, they take in that trauma again.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to do something that was very honorable, Black joy with these mothers. I actually rented out an Airbnb. I brought all these mothers together. We actually cry a lot because as an artist, I got really involved in this, and I learned a lot from these mothers. These mothers, some of them are ashamed. They don't want to be out in the forefront because of how society view them, okay? But when it comes to a mother, mothers are very nurturing and they love unconditionally. And I wanted to give these Black mothers their honor. And I love the article that the New York Times written about these mothers. And Miss Carr, the one that's in the middle with the white on, mm-hmm. This was almost the end. I think the third through the last shot that I took. Mm-hmm. And I didn't tell her what to do. Her hands just came out, and it brought chills to me. And I said, this is the image. And this image of the mothers is juxtaposed on the wall with a famous master photographer, Richard Avedon. He was a photographer that I studied when I was in school at Georgia State getting my MFA. And I loved his work because of his portraits, okay? And how I felt that they were very genuine and authentic. And this image was to my left, is an image of Julian Bond holding his 6-month-old daughter, Phyllis Bond, with the SNCC students behind him. And when you see the image juxtaposed with the mothers, they are childless. And when I talk to these mothers about how does it feel to lose a child, they were telling me that they still feel that in their womb. And I thought that was so powerful. So I don't haphazardly just put images out anywhere on the streets. It has to make sense and curate it right. And so I decided that it would be good to place these images right around the city of the jail, the courthouse, and city council. And basically, this is giving honors to the mothers, and this is about the legacy of the civil rights movement in the past and the Black Lives Matter movement now.
Mm-hmm. I think that's beautiful. You know, somehow in society, we can find sympathy for mothers who say lost their children to an opioid addiction or something like that. We'll find that sympathy. But often these mothers in this situation are vilified or blamed. And so I think it's wonderful that you were able to, you know, take them in for just a couple of days and allow them some self-care and joint healing, you know, support for one another. I think that's wonderful. Going back to the photo itself, There is a history of protest photography within the social justice movement. I can think of at least two iconic moments where photos changed the direction of the movement and created broad-based support for its aims. These include the photos of Emmett Till's open casket funeral and pictures of the 1963 children's marchers suffering attacks from police dogs and water hoses. These images shocked the conscience of the nation and people really all over the world. And in more recent years, video evidence of police brutality, such as the video of George Floyd's murder, has sparked outrage and widespread cause for police reforms. Now we're looking at photos of the mothers. But given this history of photography's role in social justice advancements, what was your intended impact of this photo in particular?
You're talking about the mother's photo?
Yeah.
It basically was about giving honor to these mothers, and it was nothing else, because you can become drained with all of this noise coming at you. And I wanted to get a perspective from the mothers about how they feel, and feel about not necessarily the movement, about how they're placed in society as mothers of victims of police brutality. And I just wanted this work to be an honor of, even though it has trauma, but Black joy, giving these mothers their joy. It's like you mentioned about in Birmingham, the Children Crusades. I have images of the elders that were children at that time, okay? Because within I might be getting a little bit off track, but the children were told to go out. They always used the children, because if you notice in a lot of my photographs, you see children, you see flags. And can you think about how they are constantly have to live with this? And you have the image of these children. I took this photograph, and these are, they have mothers, okay? And I was thinking about, this was at in Atlanta, and I can't think of his name right now, where they burnt down the Wendy's. Could you remember?
Yeah, I'm blanking on the name as well.
With that too. And my attention was really struck on these two young people, of how they were looking, what were they thinking about? And think about how young they are, and something that they have to constantly deal with that growing up, And like I said, they have mothers, and that's why I wanted to give tribute to the mothers, because of that. And that's what this was all about. It wasn't about, well, if I could say this, a lack of better words, it wasn't about, it was just giving honor to the mothers and looking at the past and moving forward. And if you notice too, is you see, like, those are rose petals.
I was wondering what that was, if they were leaves, if it was.
Yeah, those are rose. Like an artist, they don't really tell you a lot about the work. They want the viewer to really look at the work, but those are rose petals that are falling. These are all the falling children from police brutality, okay? But I love to let the viewer look at the work and what they get out of the work. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may be human for a moment, you talking about the children, I just realized that my first, the very first time I witnessed police brutality for myself, like in person, I was a teenager. I was perhaps 15 years old. So I myself was a child the first time I ever saw that happen. And so many of us, we carry this trauma, as you said, and so every time you see it in the news or you hear about another victim, unconsciously, you're kind of stirring up the time you saw it before and the time you saw it before, or the time it happened to your friend or your brother or your husband or your father or sister, you know what I mean? And so being joyous, being happy, being peace is in and of itself a revolutionary act. Taking a moment to take care of yourself is in and of itself a revolutionary act. And I think that this photo and the experience that you created for those mothers is an example of that. So thank you so much for doing that. Okay, I want to move on to your project called The Invisible Empire. This is an intimate portrait of Stone Mountain Park in Georgia. This park is located only 16 miles east of Atlanta. It is the most visited tourist site in the state of Georgia. The park is named for the dome-shaped mountain at the center of the park, the north face of which bears a giant carving of 3 Confederate leaders: Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson. So large is the carving that the Southern Poverty Law Center refers to it as the Confederate Mount Rushmore. According to the Atlanta History Center's website, the creation of this Confederate monument is closely tied to the refounding of the Ku Klux Klan, and the KKK originally received easements to perform its rituals on Stone Mountain grounds. Of course, that was a long time ago, but that is the history of its founding. To this day, the internal roads of the park bear the names of Confederate heroes, and through at least the middle of 2021, before the board voted to change it, Confederate flags were on prominent display in the park. Despite its history, Stone Mountain Park draws a diverse crowd of outdoor enthusiasts and nature lovers, tourists, and Georgia residents alike. It has camping grounds, hiking trails, waterways, and even a lift that will take you to the top of the mountain. It is an undoubtedly beautiful place. And yet, there's something haunting about your photos of Stone Mountain. I just want to show a few of those from your Invisible Empire exhibit. So, of course, one of the waterways in the park. When did you take these? Do you remember?
This has all been taken between 2019 and 2021. This body of work was part of a commission that I got, and it's part of the High Museum Picturing the South. And it was shown the latter part of last year up to this year, and it's traveling now to Cincinnati, Ohio.
So what were you trying to capture with these? So this one I'm showing right now is of the monument itself.
Yeah. Well, what happened was I received a call from the photo editor from the Washington Post in latter part December of 2019. And he wanted to commission photographers out to talk about racism. And by that time, like I said earlier, all of that was wearing me out. I really wanted to move on to something else. And I told him that I would do it, but I didn't want to photograph protests. I said, I'm going to challenge myself to do landscapes and go to Stone Mountain. And I found that when I say us, when I'm talking about society, what are we all fighting? What we're fighting over is the land. It's all about the land. And I thought that it would be very proper for me to talk about the land through Stone Mountain because of the symbolism and what it represents. And I thought about my parents that from the Jim Crow era. They're both passed now. And believe it or not, my parents never talked to me about the civil rights movement. And when I started engaging more into this work, 1960 now until now, I ran home like a little girl and I asked my mother, I said, why did you talk to us about the civil rights movement? She said, because I didn't want you to hate white people. So this is my journey to Stone Mountain. It's like a reckoning, trying to understand what and why that we in society have to live the way that we live, and how different cultures are against each other through white supremacy. And I wanted to show these images, very beautiful, very haunting, to engage, because Stonewall, even though it has this symbolism there and what it represented in the past, it's a beautiful mountain. And I think about this work more spiritually so. And that was my take on this work. Is a reckoning for me is, how do we as people move forward? Because one of the images I titled called There Is a Future. And we're living in the unknown, and all of this noise, everybody is feeling something, okay? Everybody is feeling something. So living in the unknown and with all of this noise, how are we going to move forward? And that's what this last image is about. There is a future. And it's very, this body of work is very spiritual for me. I'm trying to get beyond the physical and move forward. Because if we don't use I'm going to speak for myself, as a visual storyteller and a creative, how can I bring my imagery to the world to get them to try to understand spiritually so on how to move forward? Because we're so caught up on the physical, black, white, brown, yellow, is how are we going to move forward? So there is a future.
Absolutely. I want to share a quote, and I can't remember if this was on your website or one of the articles or what, but it's by W.E.B. Du Bois, and says, Georgia is beautiful, yet on its beauty rests something disturbing and strange. And these images harken back to that thought. And it touches on one of the themes that I've been thinking about. And one of the themes that I think Martin Luther King highlighted during his lifetime. There is this tension in the Black American experience between having a deep love for one's country and a deep disappointment with injustice. You know, you're drawn to the beauty of America and its ideals, but repulsed by the mistreatment and the dehumanization of different marginalized groups. And all major civil rights activists have kind of talked about that tension. Frederick Douglass says, what is the 4th of July to a slave? Martin Luther King says, or he quoted the Declaration of Independence during his I Have a Dream speech. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I imagine you, as the child of a veteran, might grapple with this tension from time to time, loving your country, of course, but feeling the wounds of it just the same. And you even capture this in a poem on your website where you repeatedly use these phrases, I cried, or imagine the trauma.
Right, yes.
So talk to me about that tension and how your work kind of contributes to that conversation. Because you do have a lot of American flags. I noticed that. You show the American flag.
I think within the word, you know, because I'm photographing what I see and what I feel that is important, is the flag is constantly reappearing in a lot of my work because it's there, whether young people are with the flag, or whoever's with the flag, or even if the flag is held upside down and being distressed. Because one thing that's very important when it comes to, I believe, Black culture is, this is the only country that we really ever knew. And it's a love and hate relationship. And I'll give you an example. When I was in grad school, I did a body of work on my father. He's a Vietnam vet. He spent 2 terms in Vietnam and was hurt on one of them and had to go back. And I wanted to know about how he felt. He wouldn't talk too much. He just allowed me to photograph him. But one thing that he said to me is, he loved this country and he had to do what he had to do. And as a Black male, being in the service in the 70s, and it could be like that now, the amount of racism that he's experienced. My mother even told me one time that he would get dressed up like he's going to work, but never went to work. And the PO, the police officers, came to find out where he was at. And he told my mother he didn't want to go because he heard his officer talking about him calling the N-word a lot, okay? And it hurt him deeply. But yet and still, he loved his country. Yet and still, Black people love this country.
Absolutely. And through the civil rights movements and just other, and art, I think because of that unique experience, African Americans have contributed a lot towards helping America achieve its ideals, right? We're kind of on this ongoing project of realizing the ideals of America, and African Americans have a unique and prominent place in that realization because of our experience here. Well, Sheila, I just want to thank you. I thank you for your work. I want to thank you for your insights. I want to thank you for continuing to amplify cries for justice and equity. I want to thank you for contributing to Burr Forman's conversation regarding the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And we just look forward to seeing what more art you're going to put out there in the world, and what joy you'll create and hopefully experience.
Joy, because I wanted to say this last thing. Thank you very much for having me, and it's an honor. And I would like to say that if we cannot see the justice and the beauty of this, there's no love. And to move forward, I want to do more work surrounding the land. And I'm photographing Black farmers now, urban Black farmers.
Very exciting.
And thank you.
Very exciting. Well, we look forward to seeing that. Sheila Pree Bright, please keep in touch and let us know when that work is ready.
Okay, thank you.